The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the dense forest. The woods were quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. It was a warm spring day, the kind that promised the start of something new, but for 6-year-old Lily Mason, the day felt oddly unsettling. She skipped ahead, her small feet kicking up little clouds of dust on the trail as she grasped her father's hand. His grip was firm, almost too firm, but Lily didn't mind. She trusted him, or at least she always had. Edward Mason, dressed immaculately in a dark suit that stood in stark contrast to the wild landscape around him, barely glanced at his daughter. His cold eyes scanned the trees, the path, his mind elsewhere, lost in thoughts Lily couldn't begin to comprehend. The expensive fabric of his suit was slightly out of place in the wilderness, but Edward didn't care. To him, appearances were everything, and nature was just another backdrop to his life, one he could control and manipulate like everything else. Lily, however, saw it differently. She loved the outdoors. She loved the forest smells, the crunch of leaves beneath her shoes, and the peaceful sound of birds chirping in the distance. But today, something was off. Her father hadn't spoken much, and when he did, it was to say things like, "Hurry up, Lily," or "Stay close to me." The usual warmth in his voice was absent, replaced by something colder, more distant. "Daddy?" Lily asked, tugging on his hand as they walked. "Why are we going so far today? It's getting late." Edward's eyes narrowed slightly, but he masked it quickly with a smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "There's something special I want to show you, sweetheart," he said, his voice smooth but not quite convincing. He wanted to believe his own lie. Lily wasn't convinced, but she didn't know how to ask the right questions. She just wanted to make her father proud, to be the little girl he wanted her to be. They walked for what seemed like hours, winding through the forest. The path became narrower, the trees closer together until they reached a secluded grove. Lily, oblivious to her father's intentions, continued to explore the area. She knelt down to pick a flower, the vibrant colors contrasting against the dull forest floor. "Look, Daddy," she called out, holding up the delicate bloom. "It's so pretty." Edward didn't respond. Instead, he stood a few steps away, his eyes fixed on a point in the distance. He had found the perfect place. He had planned everything meticulously. This was the moment. His fingers twitched slightly as he watched his daughter. She was so innocent, so trusting. It made what he was about to do even easier. There was no hesitation in his mind. He had made up his mind long ago. Lily, unaware of the darkness surrounding her, continued to admire the flower. "What are we going to do after this, Daddy? Can we go home?" Edward's jaw tightened. He glanced at her for a moment before answering. "Of course, sweetheart, but first, let's just go a little further. There's something special I want to show you." He guided her, gently but firmly, toward a large tree at the edge of the grove. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Edward's heart raced, though it wasn't from fear. It was from anticipation. Every step felt like a countdown to the moment that would finally free him from the burden of his daughter. "Do you see it?" he asked, pointing toward the base of the tree, where a large root jutted out of the earth. Lily stepped forward, curious, but as she moved closer, she suddenly felt a chill, a strange instinct that told her to stop. She turned back to her father, confusion written across her innocent face. "Daddy, what's—" But before she could finish, Edward made his move. In one quick, calculated motion, he feigned tripping over a root, throwing his body forward and using the momentum to push Lily harshly against the tree. The impact was jarring, and Lily let out a startled cry as she stumbled forward, her hand reaching out for something, anything to steady herself. The world spun for a moment as Lily tried to gather herself. She barely registered the sudden rustling in the leaves beneath her, the soft hiss of something slithering through the dirt. And then, there it was, the rattlesnake. Lily froze, its cold eyes locked onto hers as it raised its head, ready to strike. The air seemed to go still, and all she could hear was the sound of her own breathing, shallow and fast. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs wouldn't move. "Daddy!" she cried, her voice trembling. "Daddy, help me!" Edward, pretending to be horrified, stepped back quickly, feigning panic. "Stay still, Lily," he shouted, but there was no real concern in his voice. His eyes, cold and calculating, watched as the snake prepared to strike. Lily didn't understand. She didn't understand why her father wasn't helping her. Her small body trembled as the venomous fangs sank into her leg. The pain was immediate, intense, like fire racing through her veins. She cried out, feeling the burning sensation spread rapidly through her body. "Daddy!" she cried again, tears flooding her eyes. "It hurts. Help me." But Edward was already backing away, his face a mask of false worry. "I'll go get help," he shouted, his voice thick with mock desperation. "Stay right here, sweetheart. Don't move." He turned and fled, leaving Lily alone, vulnerable and terrified. The snake, having completed its strike, retreated to its den. The silence of the forest returned, broken only by Lily's sobs. She could barely keep her eyes open now, the venom working its way through her small body, draining her strength. And then, just as everything seemed hopeless, something remarkable happened. From the corner of her blurry vision, she saw movement. A figure, white as snow, emerged from the trees. A horse, strong and majestic, its eyes filled with intelligence and compassion. Storm. The white horse approached her, its hooves making soft rhythmic thumps against the ground. Its presence brought a sense of calm to the chaotic storm of fear and pain inside Lily. The horse stood near her, its head tilted, watching her carefully. Lily felt a strange pull, an unspoken connection. The horse seemed to understand, as if it knew exactly what she needed. She reached out a trembling hand toward it, her fingers brushing against its warm coat. "Please, don't leave me," she whispered weakly. Storm lowered its head, nudging her gently with its muzzle. It seemed to understand her pain, its dark eyes filled with an unspoken promise to protect her. With surprising tenderness, the horse nuzzled her injured leg, its breath warm against her skin, offering her comfort in her darkest moment. The venom still burned inside her, but Lily found strength in the horse's presence. It wasn't a human, but it was something even better. It was her savior. And that was when she knew. She wasn't alone anymore. Lily's eyes fluttered open slowly, the world around her blurry and distant. She blinked several times, trying to clear the haze that had settled in her vision. Her body felt heavy, like she was moving through water, the sensation of weakness lingering in every muscle. A dull pain throbbed in her leg, but there was something else, something unexpected that filled her with warmth. The soft rustling of leaves and the rhythmic pounding of hooves reached her ears, almost like a distant dream. She struggled to sit up, but her limbs wouldn't cooperate, leaving her feeling helpless. "Where am I?" Lily whispered to herself, her voice barely a croak. The forest, once an unfamiliar and frightening place, seemed strangely calming now. She felt no fear. Instead, she felt safe. She tried to turn her head, her weak movements sluggish and slow. And that's when she saw him. A magnificent white horse, standing a few feet away, watching her with intelligent, dark eyes. Its coat gleamed in the filtered sunlight, almost glowing in the fading daylight. The horse's large, strong frame was poised with confidence, yet there was an undeniable gentleness in its demeanor. Lily blinked again, unsure if she was still dreaming. The pain in her leg was real, but the presence of the horse felt like a miracle. "Are you real?" she asked, her voice cracking as she struggled to sit up straighter. The horse lowered its head slightly, as if acknowledging her question. With each slow step, the horse closed the distance between them. Lily felt her heart race as the animal's warm breath met her face. Its gaze was kind, almost knowing, and something inside her told her this horse wasn't just any animal. It was something special. She raised a trembling hand toward him, her fingers brushing against his sleek white coat. The horse didn't flinch. Instead, it nuzzled her hand gently, as if comforting her. A flood of relief washed over Lily, the fear and confusion that had plagued her slowly dissipating. She felt as if she had been saved, though she didn't know by what, until now. "You came for me," she murmured, the realization sinking in. The white horse had heard her cries. It had come to her rescue. Storm, the white horse, stood by her side, its steady presence offering her a kind of solace she had never experienced before. Despite her pain, despite the venom coursing through her small body, Lily felt a sense of peace. The horse's eyes, deep and wise, seemed to assure her that she would be okay. As she looked up at him, her heart filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. For a moment, Lily lost herself in the soft rhythm of Storm's breathing, the calming sound of hooves against the forest floor, and the gentle nudge of the horse's muzzle. But then, the pain in her leg returned, sharp and unrelenting. It was as if the venom inside her was waking up, spreading throughout her body, and Lily knew she needed help, real help, before it was too late. The horse's gaze shifted, and in that moment Lily understood. Storm was trying to tell her something. He wasn't just standing there for comfort. He was leading her somewhere. Summoning what little strength she had left, Lily struggled to her feet, leaning against the horse for support. Her leg buckled beneath her, but the horse steadied her with a firm, gentle nudge. "I don't know where we're going," Lily whispered, feeling an odd sense of trust in her new companion. "But I'll follow you." Storm took a few steps forward, then stopped, turning his head slightly to look at her, as though waiting for her to catch up. Lily nodded, determination building within her. She wasn't alone anymore. She had someone watching over her. The trek through the forest was slow, but Storm kept a careful pace, making sure that Lily stayed upright. Every few steps he would pause, allowing her to regain her footing. Despite the pain and the weakening effect of the venom, Lily's spirits were lifting. The horse's presence gave her strength she didn't know she had. After what seemed like hours, the dense trees began to thin, and Lily could just barely make out the outline of a small house in the distance. The house was modest, simple, and nestled at the edge of the woods. Marina's house. Marina Carter had been tending to her garden when she first heard the distant sound of hooves. She had lived on the outskirts of the small town her whole life, and Storm's unusual behavior had drawn her attention many times before. But this time, there was an urgency in the animal's movements that made Marina's heart race. She set down her watering can and walked toward the woods, scanning the trees for any sign of the horse. Her husband, John, was inside, preparing for another long day at the co-op, but something told her that this moment, this strange, unsettling moment, was important. The sight of Storm, galloping towards her with such determination, sent a chill down her spine. As the horse slowed to a stop just a few feet from her, Marina's eyes fell to the small, fragile form clinging to his side. Lily. The girl was pale, her face twisted in pain, and her small body was trembling, but she held on to Storm like her life depended on it, because in that moment it did. "Lily?" Marina called softly, her voice tinged with disbelief. She had heard of the missing child, but she never expected to find her like this, alone and injured in the forest. Her heart clenched at the sight of the small girl, pale and frail, sitting on the ground, supported only by the white horse that stood beside her like a sentinel. Lily's eyes flickered with recognition, and a weak smile crossed her face. "He saved me," she whispered, her voice shaky. He came for me." Marina dropped to her knees beside the girl, her hands trembling as she gently touched Lily's forehead. The child was burning with fever. The snake bite, the venom, had taken its toll. "Stay with me, Lily," Marina whispered, her heart breaking for the innocent child. "We're going to get you help." Without another word, Marina stood up, her gaze fixed on the white horse. Storm's eyes met hers, and for a moment it felt as though the animal was asking for her to do what needed to be done. "I need to get her home. John can help," Marina said, her voice filled with urgency. She turned back to Lily, who was still clutching Storm's side. "Can you hold on, Lily?" she asked softly, but the girl was already too weak to respond. Marina scooped her into her arms, feeling the fragile weight of the child in her hands, and began walking quickly back toward the house, with the Storm trotting alongside them. The air around her felt heavier now, laden with the gravity of what had just happened. Storm's steady presence gave her hope as she walked. Marina didn't know what she was getting into, but she knew one thing for sure. This child needed her, and she wouldn't leave her side. Lily's breathing was shallow, her body restless against the worn sheets of the couch. The warmth of the blanket she had been tucked in couldn't mask the growing chill in her bones, a coldness that had nothing to do with the weather. In the dim light of the room, she lay still, her eyes staring at the ceiling, the faint shadows of her past creeping into her thoughts. She had been so certain that the pain was over. She had felt it, that warmth, that peace, as Storm had carried her through the woods, through the agonizing moments when her small body had been ravaged by venom. And Marina had been there, kind, gentle, protective. But even that warmth couldn't chase away the doubts that had settled in Lily's heart. Not yet, her father. The thought burned like a fresh wound, raw and searing. She hadn't allowed herself to think about him, about Edward, for too long. But now, as the days stretched on, the memories came creeping back, uninvited. Her father's face, cold and emotionless, his voice flat and dismissive, were becoming impossible to escape. Had he really tried to kill her? The question echoed in her mind, each repetition a painful stab. The image of him, pushing her toward the tree, standing by as the rattlesnake struck, was as clear as if it had happened only moments ago. But the truth was hard to face. It was easier to bury the memory, to hide it beneath the surface and pretend it hadn't happened. Yet there was Marina, sitting by her side, offering reassurance with every soft word, every gentle touch, and John, her husband, who had been there every moment, even as life had thrown its struggles their way. They weren't perfect, no one was, but they had shown her what it meant to be loved unconditionally, even when she didn't deserve it. The warmth of their home, the small but constant comfort of being with people who cared, was a new experience for Lily. It had been so long since she had felt safe. And now, with her father's shadow hanging over her, it felt as if that safety was slipping away. Lily pushed the thought aside as best as she could. She wasn't going to let him control her anymore. He had hurt her, but he would never have power over her again. Not if she could help it. "Marina," she whispered, her voice small but loud enough to cut through the silence. Marina, who had been sitting at the window, watching the fading light of the evening, turned with a soft smile, her face illuminated by the golden glow of the setting sun. "Yes, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice soothing, comforting. "I want to be strong. I want to be like you," Lily said, her voice trembling. "But I don't know how." Marina walked over to the couch and sat beside her, her hand gently brushing a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. "You're already stronger than you think," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "You've been through so much, and you're still here. You've come this far, and you're not alone anymore. We're here with you, every step of the way." Lily closed her eyes, letting the weight of Marina's words settle in. She wasn't alone. She had never been alone, not really. Storm had been there too. He had saved her life, standing as her protector, watching over her without question, just as Marina and John had done. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lily allowed herself to rest, her mind quieting as the exhaustion of the past days finally caught up with her. But just as she was about to drift off, the sound of hooves outside drew her back to the waking world. Storm. Lily's eyes snapped open, and she shot up from the couch, her heart racing. She didn't know what had caused the sudden burst of anxiety, but the sound of the horse's hooves, steady, confident, stirred something deep inside her. She had never heard Storm like this before. There was an urgency in his steps now, a tension that she could feel from inside the house. Marina stood as well, her eyes narrowing as she glanced toward the door. "Storm's restless," she muttered. "He hasn't acted like this before." John, who had just come in from the barn, looked up at the two of them, concern evident on his face. "Is something wrong?" he asked, already moving toward the door. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the shadows of the night were beginning to stretch long and dark. "I'm not sure," Marina said, her voice laced with unease. "But Storm's been acting odd all day." Lily's stomach twisted with a knot of fear, but she didn't want to show it. She wasn't going to let the past control her. She was stronger than that. Still, something told her that the danger she had escaped wasn't truly gone. "I'm going to check on him," John said, his voice steady, but the slight edge of worry in his tone wasn't lost on anyone. Marina nodded. "Be careful. Something doesn't feel right." John stepped out into the cool evening air, his boots crunching on the dry leaves as he made his way toward the stable. The distant call of a crow echoed through the trees, the only other sound in the growing darkness. Lily stood by the window, her small hands pressed against the glass, watching John disappear into the twilight. Storm's restless movements only heightened her own sense of unease. The horse was never this agitated unless something was wrong. Something, or someone. The door opened again, and John returned, his expression hard to read. He had Storm by the reins, but the horse was pacing nervously, his ears flicking back and forth, his eyes alert. "It's Edward," John said, his voice low. "He's back." Lily's heart skipped a beat. The name hit her like a physical blow. Edward, her father. She had been so close to forgetting him, but now his presence loomed larger than ever before. Marina's face hardened, the calmness that had so often defined her replaced with a flicker of fear and anger. "What is he doing here?" she asked, though the answer was already clear in her eyes. John's grip tightened around Storm's reins. "I'm not sure, but he's here, and he's not leaving until he gets what he wants." Lily felt a chill run down her spine. She knew what Edward wanted. He wanted her. He wanted control over her life, and that was something he would never have again, Her father had already shown her how far he was willing to go to get what he wanted. Now he was back, and there was no telling what he would do to reclaim his prize. But this time, Lily wouldn't let him take control. Not again. Marina and John exchanged a look, and Lily saw the resolution in their eyes. They would protect her. They had to. As the night deepened, the tension in the air grew thick with the weight of what was coming. The peaceful sanctuary that had given Lily a taste of what it meant to truly belong was about to be shattered. Edward Mason had returned, and with him the shadow of the past. But this time, Lily wouldn't face it alone. The next morning, the sky was painted in muted shades of gray, clouds hanging heavily over the land as if the earth itself was preparing for a storm. Lily sat by the window, her small hands resting against the cold glass. She couldn't see him yet, but she could feel him, the heavy presence of her father, lurking just beyond the trees. The air seemed to hum with the tension she felt in her chest. It had been hours since John had returned from the barn, his face grim as he reported Edward's arrival. The uneasy silence that followed had hung in the air like an unspoken agreement. Things were about to change. This time, Lily wouldn't allow herself to be a victim. She was stronger now, stronger than when she had been left in the woods to die. "Lily," Marina's soft voice broke through her thoughts. Lily turned to look at her, finding the familiar warmth and concern in her eyes, the same strength that had anchored her in the past few days. But even Marina, as composed as she was, couldn't hide the fear that had taken root. Edward's presence had cast a shadow over their peaceful home, and it was only a matter of time before it reached them. "I know you're scared," Marina said gently, sitting beside her, "but you don't have to face this alone." Lily swallowed, her throat tight. She nodded, though a part of her wanted to scream, to shout out her fears. She wasn't a little girl anymore. She had been through too much, seen too much, to hide behind the walls of silence and submission. Edward's cruelty had shaped her, but it wouldn't define her, not anymore. "I'm not alone," Lily whispered, her voice quiet but steady. "I have you." Marina smiled and squeezed her hand. "And John. And Storm. You're part of this family now, Lily, and nothing will tear that apart." The weight of her words settled in Lily's heart, but it was still hard to shake the memories, the betrayal, the hurt, the abandonment. She hadn't forgotten. The scars on her body were only part of the damage. The emotional wounds were deeper, harder to heal, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope, a tiny spark that she had been afraid to embrace. Just then, the door opened, and John stepped into the room, his boots heavy on the floor, his face as determined as ever. "He's here," he said, his voice grim. "Edward's standing outside. He's waiting." Lily's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't move. She didn't need to. This wasn't a moment to be afraid. This was the moment she would take control of her life. Marina stood up, her expression hardening. "We'll face him together," she said, her tone resolute. "We're not backing down." John nodded, his eyes meeting Lily's. "We won't let him take you. You're safe here." Lily looked between them, her mind racing. They weren't just words, they were promises. And for the first time in her life, she believed them. She had never had anyone who fought for her before, never had anyone who cared enough to stand between her and danger. But now she had Marina, she had John, and she had Storm. "Let's go," John said quietly, leading the way out the door. "We need to do this before he thinks he has all the control." The trio stepped outside, the cold wind biting at their faces as they walked toward the front yard. Storm stood by the stable, his head low, his eyes alert. His hooves shifted restlessly on the ground, but there was a calmness in the way he stood. He wasn't just a horse. He was more than that now. He had become Lily's protector, her guardian, and he wouldn't let Edward anywhere near her. Lily's breath caught in her throat as she saw him standing there. Edward, her father, dressed in his usual expensive suit, standing tall and proud in the middle of the yard like he owned the land itself. He didn't move when they approached, his eyes cold and calculating. The man who had abandoned her, left her to die in the woods, was now here, standing in front of her like nothing had ever happened. Edward's lips curled into a thin smile, but there was no warmth in it. "So, this is where you've been hiding," he said, his voice smooth, almost taunting. "I must say I'm impressed. You've found yourself quite the little family, haven't you?" Lily's heart clenched at the sight of him. He didn't even look like her father anymore. He was just a man, someone who had betrayed her in the worst way imaginable. She wanted to say something, to scream at him, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she stood taller, her shoulders straight, and her chin raised. She wasn't going to let him control her any longer. "We're not hiding," John said firmly, stepping in front of Lily, his presence a shield between her and Edward. "You're not welcome here." Edward's eyes flickered with a brief flash of anger, but he quickly masked it with a smirk. "You think you can stop me? I have every right to take my daughter back." "No," Marina said, stepping forward to stand beside John, her voice unwavering. "You have no right. You abandoned her. You tried to kill her. You have no place here, Edward." For the first time, Edward's mask cracked, his expression darkening. "You don't understand," he spat, his voice low and dangerous. "She's mine. She's always been mine, and no one, not you, not anyone, will take her away from me." Lily felt her body tense at his words, the familiar sting of fear beginning to creep into her chest. But she refused to let him see it. She had come too far. She wasn't going to let him control her life again. "You lost the right to call me yours," Lily said, her voice strong, despite the fear threatening to choke her. "You pushed me away. You tried to kill me. You're not my father anymore." Edward's eyes flashed with rage. "You ungrateful little—" "Enough!" John cut him off, his voice booming across the yard. "You've done enough damage. You're not taking her. You're not welcome here. If you think you can just walk in and take her like she's some possession, you're wrong." Edward took a step forward, but Storm, sensing the growing tension, stepped in between them, his massive body blocking Edward's path. His head lowered, and his nostrils flared as he let out a soft snort, standing his ground like a true protector. Edward stopped in his tracks, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "What is this?" he sneered. "A horse? You're letting a horse protect her now?" Storm stood firm, his eyes never leaving Edward's, a low, rumbling snort escaping from his throat. He wasn't just any horse. He was the one who had saved Lily's life, and he wasn't about to let anyone, least of all Edward, take her from him. "You're right about one thing," John said, his voice cold. "This horse is here to protect her, and so are we." Edward's gaze flickered between John, Marina, and Storm, and for the first time a shadow of doubt crept into his eyes. He had underestimated them all. He thought he could control this situation, that he could reclaim what he believed was his. But he hadn't counted on the strength of the family standing before him, nor the loyalty of the horse that had become a symbol of their defiance. "Get out," Marina said, her voice steady, unwavering. "You've done enough. It's over." Edward's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing into cold slits. He was used to winning. He was used to getting what he wanted. But here, now, standing before the people who had claimed Lily as their own, he knew he had lost. He was no longer in control. "I'll be back," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And when I do, you'll regret this." Without another word, Edward turned and stalked off, disappearing into the distance, his figure swallowed by the shadows of the woods. For a long moment no one moved. The air was still, the tension hanging like a heavy fog. But as Lily stood there, watching her father disappear, something inside her shifted. It was over. He wasn't coming back, not like this. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Marina and John both turned to her, their expressions softening. "We're always here for you," John said quietly. Lily smiled, her heart finally beginning to settle. She had found her family, and this time they weren't going anywhere. The morning after Edward's departure, the world felt different, quieter, lighter. The air was filled with a sense of calm, the kind that comes only after the storm has passed, leaving behind only the soft whisper of wind through the trees. Marina stood on the porch, gazing out at the fields that stretched endlessly before her. The peaceful scene before her seemed at odds with the intensity of the past few days. It was as if life itself had taken a deep breath, waiting for the next step. The house was quiet, save for the gentle sound of Sophia's laughter coming from the backyard. She was outside, playing with Storm. The horse had become more than just an animal to her. It was her protector, her friend, her savior. Every time she touched his soft coat, every time she held onto his reins and rode through the fields, she could feel the bond between them growing stronger. Marina smiled, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and sorrow. She had never imagined that her life would turn out this way, that she would find a daughter in need of protection, and that the love and loyalty of a horse could save a child's life. But now, as she watched Sophia from the window, she felt that everything had led her to this moment. John came up behind her, his footsteps soft on the wood of the porch. "She's doing better, isn't she?" he asked, his voice filled with quiet pride. Marina nodded, her eyes never leaving Sophia. "Yes, much better. But there's still so much to process. I know she's not completely healed from what happened. The emotional scars, they're deeper than anything physical." John placed a hand on her shoulder, offering comfort without saying a word. He, too, had seen the toll it had taken on Sophia. The bruises left by Edward's cruelty would never completely fade, but the love and care she was receiving here would, hopefully, help her heal over time. The scars might remain, but they would no longer define her. "It's not just about us, though," Marina continued, her voice softer now. "It's about Sophia finding her place in this world. She needs to know that she's not just some burden to carry, that she's worthy of love, of happiness. I don't want her to grow up thinking she's broken." "She's not broken," John replied firmly. "She's strong, stronger than most adults I know. You've seen her, Marina. She has a resilience in her, and we're here for her. Always." Marina smiled, leaning into John's embrace for a moment. "I know, and I'll make sure she knows that every day." Just as they were about to head inside, the sound of a car pulling up the gravel driveway caught their attention. Both of them turned instinctively, a familiar sense of unease settling in their chests. The car was one they didn't recognize, dark, sleek, and professional. It didn't look like anyone from the local community. John's hand instinctively moved to the gun holstered on his hip. Marina placed a hand on his arm, shaking her head slightly. They didn't know who was coming, but they couldn't be too careful. After everything that had happened, there was no such thing as too much caution. The car stopped, and the driver, an older man in a dark suit, got out, followed by a woman in an expensive-looking dress. They weren't people from the town, but they didn't appear threatening. Still, Marina's instincts were on edge. "Stay here," John said to Marina as he moved toward the car, his posture alert but calm. "I'll see what this is about." Marina nodded, her heart racing. She watched as John approached the visitors, his movements slow but purposeful. The man in the suit shook John's hand, and the woman stepped forward, holding herself with an air of quiet authority. Marina couldn't hear their conversation, but she saw John's expression harden as the woman handed him a folder, its contents hidden from view. John glanced back at Marina before nodding and taking the folder. He made his way back to her, his expression unreadable. As he approached, Marina's anxiety grew. "What's going on?" she asked. John didn't answer right away. Instead, he handed her the folder, his face serious. Marina opened it slowly, her fingers trembling slightly as she saw the first page. It was a legal document, and her heart sank when she saw the words, "Court summons." "They're here for Sophia," John said quietly. "Edward's legal team. They want custody of her." Marina's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Edward had already tried to take Sophia once, and now he was trying again. But this time he wasn't going to get away with it. Not after everything he had done. She wasn't going to let him take Sophia back into that world of pain and betrayal. "I won't let them take her," Marina said, her voice steady but filled with a new determination. "We've come too far." "I know," John replied, his voice low but filled with conviction. "And we'll fight for her, together." The next few days were a blur of activity. The legal battle was as intense as it was unexpected. Edward's lawyer, a slick man named Raymond Davis, had already started making waves in the local court system, pushing for custody of Sophia on the grounds that Marina and John had no legal right to adopt her. He argued that Edward was her biological father, and that the child had been removed from his care under false pretenses. The courtroom was a tense battleground. Edward's lawyer presented every argument he could think of, claiming that Marina and John were unfit to raise Sophia, pointing out their financial struggles, their lack of formal legal adoption, and their non-traditional lifestyle. But Marina, John, and their attorney, an experienced local lawyer named Carla Harris, weren't backing down. They knew the truth, and they were determined to fight for Sophia with everything they had. Each day felt like an eternity as the courtroom drama unfolded. The evidence of Edward's cruelty, his abandonment of Lily in the woods, and his twisted motives began to surface. Marina took the stand, telling her story with strength and dignity, and even Lily, who had been understandably hesitant, gave her testimony in a way that left everyone in the room stunned. Her bravery, her courage to speak out against the man who had tried to end her life, shone through, and it became clear that the courtroom was not only a place of justice, but a place of healing. And then there was Storm. The horse that had saved Lily's life became a symbol of the strength and loyalty that had defined this new family. Storm's calm presence in the courtroom, standing with Marina and John by their side, made the entire room pause. He wasn't just a horse, he was a protector, and his loyalty spoke volumes. In the end, it was that loyalty, combined with the undeniable truth of Edward's actions, that sealed the case in Marina and John's favor. Edward was not only denied custody, but was arrested for the attempted murder of his daughter. His manipulation, his cruelty, and his calculated abandonment were exposed for all to see, and the man who had once ruled with fear was now nothing more than a criminal in the eyes of the law. The day of the verdict was the day everything changed. Sophia, still so small and fragile, sat between Marina and John as the judge delivered the news. The custody battle was over. Sophia was safe. She was theirs. The courtroom erupted in murmurs of relief and disbelief, and Marina found herself overwhelmed with emotion. She had fought so hard for this, but it wasn't until that moment that she truly understood what it meant. The girl who had once been so lost, so broken, was now part of her family. John squeezed her hand, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "She's ours," he whispered. Sophia's smile lit up the room, her face full of joy and relief. "I'm home," she said softly. And with that, a new chapter began. The family, once fractured and broken, was now whole. The future was no longer defined by fear and trauma, but by hope, love, and a sense of belonging. And as Storm stood by their side, a silent sentinel, Marina knew that the love and loyalty of family would carry them through whatever came next. They had fought for Sophia, and they had won. The future was bright, and for the first time in a long time, the world felt safe.